then a friend of mine suddenly died, a man from suicide. And this came out of the blue. He just came back from Mount Everest, where he had hiked to the base camp. He was sharing on social media that he's never been happier. He had a girlfriend and everything was looking so great for him that I became very sad, but also I became very angry. I felt, why didn't we know anything, and why didn't he say anything? And I started to think, I blame myself. I met him a week ago, we were working on a talk together. Why didn't I see or understand anything? But then I jumped after that to solution mode. I thought I better make some noise here about this. And at this stage then I was 1 year into my recovery journey, and the only people who knew about this was my wife, doctor, anonymous support program. And I felt, screw this anonymity, screw this. And I went live on LinkedIn and I shared a post.
I want you to think back to a time when you were challenged the most. Maybe it was a big game in high school. Maybe it was getting a degree, or maybe even the first time you asked your wife out. Man, I know that for a lot of guys, that last one was pretty challenging, and that includes me as well. But what it does is it pushes us through those moments. And so some of us would call that resilience, and others would call it self-leadership. Now, both are true, but so is loneliness, stress, and anxiety. And if we're not prepared to handle those emotions at these critical times, we can be left feeling depressed, even though all around us are the signs of success. Well, today we're going to unpack just what we can do about that with my guest. But before we get into all that, I just want to remind you, if you're interested in raising your standards as a father and a husband and an entrepreneur, then I encourage you to participate in your own hero's quest. In this program, you're going to accomplish more, develop more, and become more in the next 90 days than you have ever in your life. You can get more information about this at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members.theawakenedman.net. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan Jonsson. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. What have you had the most challenging time in your life been, and what did that reveal about you? Did it make you a stronger man? I'm sure most of us would like to say yes, that our most challenging times have shaped us into stronger men. We are better for the experience, having gone through it. And while we pile on these experiences, we may even become elite at some level in a particular skill set. The challenge is that the higher, more skilled that we get, and the better that we get at things, the fewer and fewer people that we can relate to. That can lead to pain of isolation, and that can be really devastating, especially after a lifetime of achievement. Yet there's going to be some hope, because today my guest shares with us his journey along with a proven method to resolve the mental health issues facing men today. So allow me to introduce my guest. Nick Jonsson is a dynamic and inspiring business leader, best-selling author, keynote speaker, podcast host, and award-winning entrepreneur. And he is a co-founder and managing director of Executives Global Network from Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia's largest confidential peer group network for senior executives and business owners. Nick is deeply passionate about mental health awareness and believes that mental well-being is crucial for leaders to perform at their best. And I would totally agree with that. He has written a best-selling book, Executive Loneliness: The 5 Pathways to Overcoming Isolation, Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in the Modern Business World. Welcome to the show, Nick. How are things, my friend?
Thank you very much, Elaine. Yeah, things are great.
Great to hear. Great to hear. And we're speaking today from two opposite sides of the continent as we're getting ready here, right? It's quite early in the morning where you are. We're just getting ready for sunset. It's just amazing with today's technology that we can do these types of things. It just blows my mind when I get to have such powerful guests such as yourself on, and we're at completely opposite ends of this globe. So thank you so much for being here and getting up so early to do this with us.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. And I'm always up early these days anyway, getting ready for my ocean swim after this.
Awesome. Great to hear. Well, as I was saying earlier about a hero's quest in our men's, where we talk about every one of us, all of us being on some hero's quest. And so tell us about a time in your life when you knew things had to change. What did you do about it? How did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
Well, let me take you back to 2018. And as I'm looking back at that now, you could say that I hit my rock bottom. But it was not something that came overnight for me. It actually started already a few years earlier when I was laid off from one job, and then I got a new job and I was laid off from that work as well. I then filed for a divorce, and all these events accumulated, and I was keeping it all inside me until a few years later in 2018 when it all exploded all in one go. And it could have gone two ways, Ellen. If I continued to keep it inside, then I probably wouldn't have been with you today. But the pain was so grateful, and at that time I had written my will, my testament, and I really prepared myself for life to end. But that's when I decided to share how I felt with one person. And as they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. And that's when it's all turned around for me. So that's my breaking point. That's my rock bottom. And that's when I found the gift of desperation to seek help.
Well, that's pretty powerful. I have, of all the people that I've interviewed on this podcast, you're the first one to talk about making it to the point of actually, writing your will and taking all that place. And I just want to, take a moment and pause on that and think about how many times in our lives, gentlemen, that we felt that to that place. And it's not that we've made the conscious decisions to actually get up every day and put us into that spot, but life does tend to happen. And it's when we do become more unconscious. And I, one of the things we talk about also is about sleepwalking through life. And so tell me a little bit more about that. Once you started to share this experience of what you were going through, how that started to change your perspective on life and how you started to become more of a conscious man.
And Alain, the interesting thing here is that as soon as you just speak the words rather than having it playing over and over in your own head, then it's already helping you just to accumulate it, just to speak it. And that's why people even say, pray on it. They say, and people are wondering, why pray on it? Well, it is that you accumulate, you speak it out. So I don't think in this case it would have mattered much who is the person you're actually telling it to. It's just about that you're telling it to someone. But in this case, I was also double lucky because the person I said it to was later to become my new wife. And she listened and she cared, and she immediately grabbed me and did what everyone would have done who would have been a good friend or a good wife. She dragged me to a doctor, and then I had to share the story again, even though it was mainly her telling the doctor what was going on. But for every person that I shared the story, I felt that I was not alone anymore. My secrets were exposed, and while it was a painful exercise, it made me very quickly come back to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And kudos to you for also taking that next step. I find in doing this men's work, one of the challenging things is getting men to be able to open up and share, and not only just sharing with somebody they can trust, whether that be a spouse or a friend, but even then going in and getting the therapeutic help that they may need. And I think that's why the work that you're doing, especially with executives, and as I was saying in the intro there, about as we tend to go up this ladder, of success, and we become more skilled, our circle of influence tends to start to shrink, doesn't it? So talk a little bit about that and the work and how that has shaped some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so before this happened, I was a senior executive myself. So I spent, almost 20 years working my way up the ladder, starting from account executive to general manager, general director, managing director, and running big teams and so on. But I have to say, looking back at it, it was quite a lonely journey. I cared more about the promotions, impressing the bosses, than making the teams feeling, warm and engaged and so on. So I think the higher I went, the lonelier it gets. As I say, it's lonely at the top, and I could certainly feel that. And what I realized after my crash and then when I was in recovery, that those feelings were not something I was alone with. That's what many people feel in the workplace. And that's why I want to make a difference. And what we do then in the company I'm running now, where we have confidential peer groups for senior executives or entrepreneurs. So we group you with someone like-minded at your seniority level, where you have no competitors, you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then we facilitate these discussions with the moderator. And it's really to unpack these things so that they don't go too far. It's mainly about relationships, colleagues, conflicts, and you discuss it and get help with it so that you feel that you're not alone. You feel that you can, discuss it, and you feel that you get support to solve it. So it doesn't go as far as it did in my case.
Wow, what a great concept, and to be able to put that into place. And just because of the recognition that what you were dealing with, that now there's opportunity for executives, men and women, I would suspect, that are be able to participate in this work, right? And be able to share, because they don't have anyone really to turn to do that work. But before we really dive into that, I wanted to just go back a little bit, because really for some of the work that you've done, and really starting from that point of where you were at your bitter end there, where you knew things needed to change, you started to really develop resilience. And so what is something that, when you talk about that, what is something that you've always had? Like, was that part of who you are? Was that something that you needed to further develop as you progressed in your career?
Well, I was goal-driven since a young age, and I was a scholarship student through university, and I would say I would call myself an anxious overachiever, and my way of proving myself to myself and to the world was, getting that scholarship. I felt proud and demonstrate to my parents that I could do it, and to my peers and so on. And I carried that with me into the workplace as well. So I would work harder, longer hours, prepare more. And therefore, if you put in more hours, you're going to deliver more. And of course, you're probably going to go ahead, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of always feeling anxious and insecure, at delivering at that level. And I can remember the assignments, when students would start 3 days before deadline, I would have already started several weeks before. I would be 3 days before, I would be at the proofreading level, and I will just go over it until it was as perfect. So being a perfectionist perhaps is not a good trait here.
Yeah, but perfectionism is definitely something that I know that I have struggled with in my career and in my life. I was running kitchens earlier in my career, and was a culinarian, and went to the Olympics and that. And there's definitely a lot of perfection in that work, because you just can't put out anything, and the work that comes into that. And it did end up by ultimately costing me my first marriage, because of the type of industry and what it required. And I think it's important for guys to understand that we may have this tendency in our lives, and we don't recognize the outcome or what we're delivering to those of us around us. So now that you're a little bit wiser, what would you have done differently, or would you have been able to have done differently in order to maintain relationships and expand that aspect of your life?
Well, I think I should have sought some help externally outside of my workplace, either by, a coach or a mentor, or getting some kind of support outside the workplace. Because getting that coach and mentor internally, it's often provided by HR, but then we're not completely honest, because maybe the person who is our mentor is even one of our direct reports or someone in the organization. So we're just trying to put on a good show. I think we can only really be honest and vulnerable when it's someone outside the organization. And there's so many mastermind group, men's groups, and then like peer groups, what we run and so on. And I would encourage everyone to look for that. We all need that safe space outside the workplace. And I just want to add also that I think we need two safe spaces at least. One is the professional, where we can discuss, the work related and the challenges with people who can understand it. But we also need a personal safe space. And being a man, I would like to go and play golf, watching sport at the bar, having a good laugh, having fantastic mates, but I didn't really discuss the feelings I had, the challenges I had with them. So if I could do things differently, I would have been more vulnerable with my friends as well.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of us are exactly that, right? We don't have that connection with our friends. And I think large part of that is because we don't know how to do that. And so some of that work that you're doing, especially with the peer groups, helps create that safe space. And I really like how you put that together, because I think it's so true that be able to give the guys the opportunity to be able to go in and talk about things. And I also really appreciate how you've separated the professional from the personal, because we are at different places in both of those aspects. And they're so huge parts of our identity of who we are as men. And I think that's really important.
Yes, and I just want to add that I call it the vulnerability muscle. It's something like, just like you train your other muscles in the gym or for sport, you need to practice your vulnerability muscle. And yes, you do that with your personal relationship, you do it with your professional relationship, and we need to do that with our families as well. Our partner, we need to do it with our children by talking about our feelings and discussing it, because otherwise, again, we're just putting on that show, and that's not going to help ourselves in the end.
Absolutely, completely agree. So, in part of my preparation for this, I recognize that you're an Ironman athlete. So, congratulations on doing that. That's totally amazing, and you're actually very accomplished at this. And you always mention in your on your website and that you talk about your finishes in your age group. So you look like a pretty young guy there, Nick. But when did you start competing in Ironman events, and when do you think will be your last one?
Well, I started about 11 years ago. I'm 48 now, so I'm competing in the 45 to 49 age group now. And, I'm still performing at the high level. I have a Ironman Malaysia next week, and I'm hoping to be on podium place for my age group. So I've been training relentlessly for that for a few months now, you could say. And I have so much, fun doing it. The training is also to help me get out of my comfort zone, to force myself to be out and train. And I don't do any training really by myself. I join a swimming group, I join a running group, I join a cycling group. So that's my social life and my circle. And it also gives me about 2 to 3 hours every day without digital devices. So it's my meditation, getting out in the nature, and socializing all in one go.
Oh, that is beautiful. Did I pick that all right? Your training, it helps you focus and you can get out of your comfort zone. So what are you trying to accomplish when you say that? What comfort zone are you trying to expand?
Yeah, thanks for asking to clarify that. Yeah, I'm an introvert myself, so my natural space otherwise would be to isolate, sitting at home, working, being a workaholic, and going to the gym perhaps for a run or go for a run by myself. So by committing and signing up to these clubs and associations, I force myself to be there. I also show up. If I signed up, I show up. So this morning I will go on an ocean swim. I think we'll be around 30 people. And, that means that I'm socializing and meeting other people. I'm trying to have a coffee before or after with the group and so on. And I think it's so important to have these social, real in-life connection, especially in this digital world. So my point here being that, if I make sure I sign up for 1 or 2 sessions a day for 1 or 2 hours each, then I have something in the morning, something at night that breaks this pattern of this digital life. And I think we need to be so disciplined and aware about this.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you so much for revealing to us that you are an introvert, and how many of us guys think about what success looks like, or our definition of success is some extrovert that's out there and doing things. And yet we challenge ourselves as introverts. I'm an introvert as well. And we challenge ourselves to get behind the microphone, do a podcast interview, go and sign up for groups and doing Ironman competitions. And I just think it's really a breath of fresh air when we can see the different ways that we can utilize the strengths that we have and put it to use in an area that we may feel that it needs to be a bit pushed a little bit. And so thanks a lot for bringing that forward. Tell me a little bit about, so you're during these Ironman competitions, tell me 3 things that they have taught you about yourself, life, and working with others.
Well, I think the first thing it has taught me, the best way to eat an elephant is a bite at a time. It's 13 years ago when I started, I could only swim basically the breaststroke. I couldn't do the crawl swim that we need to do for the event. And I had to start with a coach, really from scratch and get going. And I remember my first triathlon, I was still swimming breaststroke, but I didn't give up. And they say that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert on something. And if I spent 11 years, 20 hours per week, then I'm sort of at the 10,000 hour mark now. So therefore I should be hitting podiums now, even that I'm coming at the end of my perhaps my career in this. But that's the first thing, is to really take a huge goal and break it down, and then focus on it, and just don't overthink it, and just get going, and that's what works. So that's the first one, Alan.
Outstanding. Listen, I want to get into a little bit about your book as well now. So executive loneliness. And so tell me a little bit what inspired you to do that. Was it because based on your experience? Was it conversation from others? Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the book.
Yeah, so remember when I shared earlier that in 2018 I hit rock bottom and I decided to tell my wife, I decided to see a doctor, I decided also to get some help. And what happened then was that I also got into a recovery program. I was drinking too much alcohol to the point where it had become an addiction to me.
Mhm.
And I had to be brutally honest with myself and I had to sort that out. And I was then brought to an anonymous support program for this, where I really then got the sympathy. I was around other people who gone through that, who also said, yeah, I went through divorce a few years ago and I was also drinking too much. I sorted it out. I now not had a drink for a few years. And that was the space where I got help. And by the way, today, Elaine and all listeners, it's 5 years ago since I had my last drink. So that's
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that was an amazing journey for me to go down. But what happened then in 2019, I was already on my way. I was feeling better about myself. I lost the weight. I was in my best shape again. Then a friend of mine suddenly died, a man from suicide. And this came out of the blue. He just came back from Mount Everest, where he had hiked to the base camp. He was sharing on social media that he's never been happier. He had a girlfriend and everything was looking so great for him that I became very sad, but also I became very angry. I felt, why didn't we know anything? And why didn't he say anything? And I started to think, I blame myself. I met him a week ago. We were working on a talk together. Why didn't I see or understand anything? But then I jumped after that to solution mode. I thought I better make some noise here about this. And at this stage, then I was 1 year into my recovery journey. And the only people who knew about this was my wife, doctor, anonymous support program. And I felt, screw this anonymity, screw this. And I went live on LinkedIn and I shared a post. I'm revealing my recovery journey. And I started a fund to raise awareness and also money for a suicide hotline. This post went viral. So what happened in the next 24 hours, people wrote to me from all over the world, hundreds of messages thanking me for speaking up about this. And then within 24 hours, I was on live radio. And then I was on a newspaper, I was on TV, and people asking me all kinds of questions. And I was in a shock state. So I kept speaking the truth. And after what happened then, of course, after 48 hours, the whole world knew my story. And that was the beginning of the book.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. It's amazing how the things that we think in our lives are just important to us. And then once we reveal it and how it touches so many lives and all of us, are so connected that way. And when we have the courage, as you did, to be able to reveal that pain, that challenge that you were feeling, that it allowed other people to be able to accept that for themselves. And I think that's really the work that we're doing here on both sides of this globe, my friends. So kudos to you on it.
Yeah, thank you. And I can say, by the way, that despite this being painful, I might not have, revealed it to the world if it wasn't for my friend's suicide, because to speak up, if I would have paused and been thinking about this, it might never have come out. But because I was in a shock, I was angry and I wanted to make a difference and take a stand. It was that short window when I told the world, and it is the best thing I ever done.
You betcha. So let's dive a little bit more into the book there. So what is your take on why executives are lonely? I've posited a few ideas on it, but what's really going on for these executives? And because I would have thought that they would have had a network that they would hang around with, but you've developed a program to give them that. So tell me a little bit more about the executives and why we become so lonely in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, well, I call it in the book a smiling depression, and I think that's a summary of basically the kind of life senior executives are living. We're putting on a show. We are not vulnerable, or we're not sharing our challenges and our weaknesses. Instead, we are putting out, a facade that we're hiding behind. So what we see is not what we get. Everyone is desperate, trying to earn money, trying to earn a living, want to also, be on TV shows, be on the front page and have that kind of media exposure, but only to, portray an image of themselves being successful, and that comes at a price when when you're putting up with this the whole time and you're not being honest, you're not being vulnerable, and the pressures on yourself and the people around you is just immense. And that is where many of these executives is. And taking back also what I said before, that many are anxious overachievers, if you're combining this, then something in the end could easily break.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we do have that. It's how we overcompensate, right? By doing more. Because what I'm taking from that is that there's still a sense of self-worth that isn't there, and that how we've measured ourselves in this one aspect. And so once they start to recognize that they have other things that are important, other aspects of who they are, then they can start to share and grow. How has that worked as they've become involved with your work? How has that started to shape and change their lives?
Well, I'm being completely honest and vulnerable myself and sharing what I've gone through and what I've done these 5 years. And now my main purpose is to give this back. And as they told me in the recovery program, in order to keep the gift, you have to give it back. So I constantly paying it back. And I do that by being a volunteer and fundraiser, not only for a suicide hotline in Singapore, but also for recovery programs. I spent my birthday the other day volunteering for a rehab for addicts. So I could, help them and give them some hope, because I was there 5 years ago, and what they need to see when they coming in there now, when they are at their rock bottom, is to see that there's a way out of this, and they don't need to hear that from a psychologist or a therapist. They need to see someone who was there. Yeah. And that is what I do. And I will again tomorrow I will be in another meeting and event where I will share my journey with them so they can see the future. So that circle has to keep coming back.
Absolutely, it sure does. And there's the power behind seeing what can happen versus having it brought to us through intellectually. We may know and we may hear what the therapist is saying to us, but when we see it in its full bloom in front of us, because somebody that's walked the path, that the power between those two is just immense. Really what you're talking about, Nick, is really about being mentors. And so I know you also talk a lot in your work about the importance of having male role models and as mentors. So let's talk a little bit about the importance to that and how that has also influenced your work.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. And if we look at it from the woman's side first, they done a great job. They have so many women leaders group, and they're driving the diversity and inclusion conversations, and they're really great in rallying up, and I see it in the network we have also here, that the women are really 100 times better than us men at this. We feel shy to raise these conversations, and perhaps we struggle to show up. Where it's working is we have men's group also in the recovery groups, but because we have a strong bond, it's working. But for men who are not in a recovery, who are not addicts or something, I see that it's very weak, very weak. We say, oh yeah, I already have good mates, and we go and play golf, or we go and watch sport, and we think that's what it is about. But I'm talking about the real male friendships where we talk about our feelings, and I have not cracked this one yet, Alan, and that's something I'm working on now. I would like to encourage a dialogue and get us men better at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things that we work on as well here at the Awakened Man, is really helping and develop that skill of being able to talk about things. And I come from the belief, just I think as you do as well, is that we have to model what it looks like. And it doesn't, when I talk in our men's work about relationships and having the difficult conversations or the critical conversations, it's going to be messy at first. And it comes back to that perfectionism thing. We don't want to look like we don't know, we don't have our stuff together. And so as guys, we tend to, I don't want to sound stupid. Well, you're probably going to sound stupid in the first time, and that's okay. And when we can model that it's all right to stumble on our words and, but to get the point across and to be there, I think we give an opportunity for men to say, hey, that Nick guy is just an average guy. He's just like me, and he's got the same similar issues that I have. And so hopefully that gives some encouragement for guys to speak up. I don't know if you're finding that in your groups as well.
Yes, absolutely. And if you feel uncomfortable doing it in a big group setting, think about who is the one or two good friends you have, who you feel you can have a conversation with. Take them and go for a walk or a bike ride or go on a car ride or whatever, and start talking a little bit about your feelings. And I say that you have to be vulnerable first before the other person will open up, and otherwise they're not going to say anything. And I do this with my teenage son. I have a 14-year-old son. And the way to do it with him is almost to trick him into these conversations. So whenever we have a phone call or Zoom call or a conversation, I'm leading by saying how I'm feeling, and I will, before the call, think about an incident I can share with him. I will tell him, well, I had a presentation for my boss yesterday, and I was feeling so anxious leading up to it. I was sweating and nervous, and I was stumbling when I started the call and so on. But then, yeah, it was good in the end. So I start talking about that, and then I throw back the question to him, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about school today or something? And then naturally, because he was listening to me talking about feelings, he will naturally reply with feelings. And it's that simple. We can do that with our male friends as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful explanation there. And that's so true. And that's all that it takes. It just takes courage for one of us to start to do that. Obviously we're also talking about the importance of relationships that we need to have in our lives. And relationships are important really in any scenario, but especially in our professions. And so what's one tip you can provide to anyone that's starting a business, or maybe they're looking to get their business to that next level? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, I think, when we are working, and it's such a complex life these days. It used to be that we work offline. Now we have the online world, and everyone you talk to say that they're so busy and they struggle to balance the online world with the offline world. And we also need to have a space for ourselves. So you also need your own time. You need your downtime. And my recommendation here would be to be disciplined about it. You need to block time for all these three worlds: your own personal space, the online and the in-person, and we need to have blocks on that for every day. Otherwise you're going to burn out. If you open your calendar and you just do online meetings the whole day back to back to back, then you're not going to get anything done. You have no time for yourself. And that is what I'm seeing with the executives who are in our groups now, or the entrepreneurs who just not having the discipline to give themselves that own space. They are the ones who are the least productive, and those are the ones who are getting sick in the end.
There we go. And that leads me to, I was going to ask, what do you think is the greatest challenge faced with executives today? And is that it really for them? Is they're not taking that time for themselves, or you found other things as well?
I would say, and to speak very frankly, I would say too many executives are too scared to lose their jobs. So they are becoming a slave to the organization, not thinking enough about themselves. But the companies see us as disposables. And if they need to make cuts, they don't care if you've been there 15 or 20 years. If they need to get rid of you, they will call it a restructuring. So they can terminate someone who's a high performer, who's been loyal to the company. So my recommendation is look at yourself and be selfish about these things. And with that, I mean, take time every day. And that time should be for you to build relationships, professional relationships. So if your company pulled the plug one day on you, you have strong professional relationships who can help you to a new job or new assignment. And my recommendation would even be proactive here. Have a plan B, have a plan C, have other careers, have other job opportunities on the go. Because now if you're going to lose your job, you might as well be proactive about it.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. That makes so much sense. You've had a pretty decent career, actually two different careers, right? One is a successful executive. You've also been really successful now with your new network and in the Ironman competitions. What would you say would be the best piece of advice that someone's given you in any of those realms?
Well, I have to say that it has been a painful journey for me, and not everyone should have to hit rock bottom to find the new career. It should be an easier way, a softer way, and that would have been to be proactive about it. So if you're listening today, think about already now, if you're not happy where you are, if there's any pain there, seek help today. And if you're sick, then get, there's therapists, there's psychologists, there's anonymous support organizations there. But even if you're not sick, but you have some pain there, look for a coach, look for a mentor, ask someone of your friends who are in similar jobs, perhaps more senior roles, and ask if they would be willing to have a coffee with you and share how you feel. That would be my suggestion.
Geez, I really love that. And so great to consider that, to go to that next level. That's that, again, it's all part of that mentoring piece, right? And getting an opportunity, because they're looking for that too. They may not recognize that executive, but it gives them an opportunity to find a way to give back. It allows them to share their experience. And, we just forget to do that, right? It reminds me that my father has been passed now for 3 years or so. And all the conversations we didn't get to have, right? And we spend so much time in our careers. Some of us are 10, 15, 20 years in our careers. And do we even get an opportunity to consider spending time and learning a little bit more about the executives and where we work, and getting an opportunity to learn from them, because they're going to move on as well too. And why not take that opportunity? So truly love that. As you're doing this work, Nick, and things are going along, and if you were to, fast forward 20 years from now, what do you think the legacy of your work would look like, and how would it be changing lives?
Well, I would certainly hope that, it's more about vulnerability as a strength as opposed to a weakness. I'm already working on my next book, and I want it to be around vulnerability and changing the perception that we should look at that as a strength rather than as a weakness. And I know it's a lot of work to be done there, but thanks to you for opening this conversation today, and thanks to all the listeners also for listening to this, because that's where I want to be in 20 years. I want us to agree that being vulnerable, being authentic, and showing openly about your challenges and asking for help is a strength.
Oh, absolutely. I hope, brother, for sure, that vulnerability truly is a strength. It's an opportunity for us to grow and learn as men. And that's where it resides. It resides in that growing edge of where we need to be in life. And that's how we get an opportunity to do even better things in life. Of everything that we had a chance to spoke about today, and maybe there wasn't something we didn't get a chance to touch on, what would be the one takeaway you'd like our audience to have?
Well, I would just like basically to recap on what we touched on already. But if there's any pain you have, if there's any feelings, if you're perhaps not sleeping well at night, or there's something that, keeping you awake, and you wake up in the morning and you have that negative or bad feeling, my suggestion would be write it down on a piece of paper, and then stop and pause, and then think about who can I talk to this about, and then write that on that piece of paper next to it and take action. And as I said, there's so many people you can ask for help. There's so many friends. Just go through your phone. You will have a lot of phone numbers, a lot of connections, or go into a search engine and look up anyone. There can be a lot of volunteers who's working for anonymous organizations you can call and have that conversation. That would be my final and most important message of today.
Just love that. Wow. Just love that. Thank you so much for that, Nick. I just want to say one more time that thank you so much for being on the show. We've laid the foundation for men, especially we're a men's network here. That's mostly who our audience is, but for any executive, any individual that's striving hard and maybe focusing a little bit too much on the one part of their identity, and to pay attention a little bit about the other parts that make them a whole human being. So if anyone's interested to get a hold of you and participate in your programs and get into do some work with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can look me up on LinkedIn, and it's Nick Jonsson. Or if they're interested in looking up my book, Executive Loneliness, it's available on Amazon, and it's also as an audiobook. So if someone prefer to listen when they at the gym or something, get it on Amazon.
Outstanding. I'll be sure to put all that information in the show notes so folks can get opportunity to reach out and spend some time with you, Nick. I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. We had an outstanding conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net. and start forging a new destiny today.